Today on Google Earth, I found a 74 square mile window hidden in its historical imagery. A window into an exterminated city in 1944. Warsaw can trace its direct history back to 1300, and it's easy for me to get lost in all those stories, parks and plazas, the delicate lace of its street grid, the backstory of each building. But I'm not looking down on rooftops today. I'm here to look through ruins. For many of the cities most devastated by the war, the fire came from the air. Millions of pounds of bombs were dropped on cities like Tokyo, Dresden, and Berlin. On Berlin alone, the Allies dropped 100 million pounds of explosives. But compared to the Polish capital, the German city feels largely intact. Buildings are burned out, especially around the Reichstag in the center city, but the metropolis is still there. I can see churches, chimneys, people in the street.
I arrived in Warsaw the 7th day of the war. The situation was far more serious than the meager censored news reports had indicated. The Polish government...
In the short 1939 air campaign to take Warsaw, the Germans dropped around 12,000 pounds of ordnance, barely 0.01% of what fell on Berlin. But sitting here with these photos, Warsaw has ceased to exist. There's not a single intact block. I mean that in the most literal sense. From villages on the outskirts to the medieval old town, not one full city block remains. I can stare down through the roofs of rows and rows of buildings, into individual rooms, into the spaces where bedrooms and kitchens used to be. The long shadows of burnt-out buildings hang out over empty streets. The empty windows make my skin crawl. On the ground, the pale cutouts they leave silently reaffirm an unimaginable truth. Every building is empty. On the roof of the central post office is a large, crudely painted swastika. It alerts German bombers, like the one from which these photos were taken, to spare the building. It's necessary because although the Germans have held the city for 5 years, the war in Warsaw continues. Not against the Soviet Red Army, which watches on from the east bank of the Vistula, but with Warsaw itself. Against not only the Polish and Jewish resistance fighters present in the city, but against every person, adult, child, against every building, every symbol of culture, every identifying feature of the city. Hospitals, bridges, schools, theaters. These photos capture more than a war. This is genocide. At the very least, ethnic cleansing had been at the center of Germany's national aims to the east from the start, and beyond Poles, the erasure of the Jewish community was at the epicenter of the German national imagination. Land to the east was to be cleared to make way for German settlements on the basis of Aryan racial hierarchy. The first Nazi plan for Warsaw, the Pabst Plan, was drafted in 1940 and called for the complete removal of the city's native population of 1.3 million, beginning with Polish Jews, to make way for a new ethnically German town of 130,000. This model town would preserve only a select few of the original city's most notable architectural works. By the end of the war, this had changed. There's one area which stands out in these photos, even among the burnt-out buildings and rubble. A white plain of pockmarks and scars, quietly looming over the northwest corner of the city. These are the boundaries of the Warsaw Ghetto in November 1940, overlaid on aerials from a peacetime Warsaw in 1935. Warsaw's pre-war Jewish population was around 350,000, second in the world only to New York City. By German decree, this entire population, alongside Jews from the neighboring countryside, were ordered into an area of just 760 acres. Visible here in the 1944 photos is the 3-meter-tall barbed wire-topped wall, which enclosed the 400,000 people confined to the ghetto, averaging more than 7 people per room. Conditions were unimaginable. The food allowed into the ghetto was insufficient. By 1941, barely 1,000 calories per person per day. Disease and executions were continual. On its northern end, the wall abuts a rail yard. It was through this gate that 265,000 men, women, and children were sent to the Treblinka extermination camp. By 1943, the ghetto had been reduced to this, with the brown sections representing forced labor factories. On April 19th, as the SS attempted its final deportation, the 66,000 remaining Jews rose up in organized resistance, fighting heavily armed German soldiers with small arms and makeshift weapons. Resistance continued for nearly a month, as SS soldiers systematically destroyed every last building in the ghetto. Of the original 400,000, maybe 20,000 would escape into the remnants of Warsaw. To read every building is entirely different than to see it. The emptiness is overwhelming. If you comb these images yourself, you will not find a single person, a single sign of life on these streets. With the unbearable knowledge of the suffering endured here, a blank face stares back at me. With fire and bulldozers, the Germans attempted to erase not just a people, but all evidence of them, all evidence of their lives, their suffering, and their resistance.
At dawn, Soviet tanks move up on the suburb of Praga in their great September advance on Warsaw.
A year later, as the Red Army pushed the German Wehrmacht back across the west bank of the Vistula, the Polish resistance rose up alongside some of the surviving Jews who fled the ghetto through the sewers. It was the largest European resistance movement of the war. For 63 days, Warsaw fought to liberate itself, and for 63 days, Stalin's army purposefully waited as the Democratic Allied fighters were ground down by the German heel. The war all but lost, Hitler ordered the city razed to the ground. Years earlier, when planning Warsaw as a new German settlement, a team of architecture and planning experts had been brought in to evaluate the city's cultural landmarks in order to determine which of the buildings to preserve. Now, the list these planners produced would be used as a blueprint for the systematic destruction of every identifying feature of the city, to erase every icon of national identity and sense of place. German units again progressed building by building, targeting parks, infrastructure, and heritage sites. By the end, 80% of Warsaw was demolished, 96.5% of its landmarks. 250,000 further Polish civilians had been killed, and the remainder deported from the city. When the Soviets finally crossed the river in mid-January 1945, they saw the genocide they had enabled.
This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel.
Not all Google Earth's historical imagery is quite as old. On October 7th, 2023, in response to coordinated attacks from Hamas, Israel's war in Gaza began. These are two separate events, but they are united by one word. Today I can slip the timeline forward and see genocide in full color. This is not a word that can be used in the approximate. Its definition is exact. It has criteria to be met. It was coined largely as a response to the Holocaust. As defined by the UN, it is the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Since the 1st of October 2024, the UN has concluded that there are reasonable grounds to consider Israeli actions in Gaza
Israel's military
genocide.
is telling 1 million people in northern Gaza to evacuate by tomorrow, while its warplanes continue to attack targets.
On the 14th of October 2023, Israel ordered 1.1 million Palestinians to evacuate northern Gaza in 24 hours, one of the fastest mass displacements in history. Since then, Palestinians have been progressively forced into smaller and smaller zones, particularly after Israel broke the ceasefire on March 18th. With organized Hamas resistance a smaller and smaller piece of the picture, the IDF has carried out a campaign of systematic destruction of the Gaza Strip. In their rhetoric and actions, Israeli leaders have intentionally conflated Hamas fighters with all Gazans, and with the idea in place of Gaza itself. The IDF's actions are not congruent with a military offensive, but with the clearing of land, the erasure of an identity and people, and implicitly the Strip's resettlement in Israeli hands. These are two separate events, but one echoes the other. The newest imagery Google Earth provides is from late 2024, and it already lags far behind the violence on the ground. These old aerials show a sea of tents stretching up the coast, over 1 million people with their backs to the sea. As I hang out over this scene, it almost freezes me. It's just simple white and blue squares, almost neatly organized. When I finally run the clock back, I'm struck with dread I can't quite describe. It's the result of an IDF order to evacuate all of Rafah, the southernmost city on the Strip, which had until recently mostly remained undamaged. By August of this year, the entire city had been flattened. Israel now says it plans to build a monitored, quote, humanitarian city in its place. Across Gaza, there are two guarantees: rubble and tents. Israeli policy has been one of planned starvation. Aid from all humanitarian organizations, including the UN, is blocked from reaching the occupied territory. The only source is an insufficient trickle from the joint Israeli-American Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Aid sites are frequently attacked. Disease is rampant. Over 90% of the agricultural and fishing economy has been destroyed. The intentional razing of farmland and greenhouses is painfully evident. With American-supplied bombs and bulldozers, Israel has declared war on hospitals, schools, parks, housing, and all other infrastructure. As of writing, 70% of all structures in Gaza have been destroyed, totaling 174,000 buildings. 58,000 have been killed, including 17,000 children. 138,000 have been wounded. If I meet Warsaw in 2024, I can find a city rebuilt, over 30 years free from dictatorial rule. Many of its monuments have been reconstructed. Its entire old town has inexplicably risen from rubble, with the aid of plans and drawings made by firelight as the occupied city burned. Through decades of fighting, the Jewish community has championed the memory of the genocide which took place here, as it did across Europe. Holocaust remembrance forces humanity to reckon with its past to create a better future. This means never again.
Israel does not target Palestinian civilians. We target Hamas terrorists. And when these terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas, when they use civilians as human shields, they're the ones who are responsible for all unintended casualties.
But this memory has also been co-opted and corrupted by Israel and its foreign backers. Across its occupied territories, Israel is using this memory to justify a genocide of its own. Its Zionist doctrine uses the Holocaust to link the safety of all Jews to the expansionist policies of the national unit itself. The line has been drawn, with the Palestinian people excluded from the definition of suffering and from the bounds of empathy which should underscore remembrance. The millennia of suffering and anti-Semitism faced by the Jewish people has been disrespected and weaponized to inflict like suffering on others. These are two separate events, but they are both fueled by the same exceptionalism: hatred, compliance, insecurity, and apathy. Never again makes no exceptions for nationality, religion, or race, for circumstance or time. A threat to this assertion anywhere is a threat to humanity writ large, and is a defilement of the hundreds of thousands who laid down their lives on these battered streets. U.S. aid to Israel must stop.